Good morning, everybody. Al Fragnoli, Zach Suddy, League of Leaders. We're joined today by Chris Starkey. Chris is a former Division One football player from Central Michigan University. Chris, thanks a lot for coming on with us today.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're going to take a little bit of a different approach today. We typically deal with people that are working in the sports industry. So we're going to take this angle from the athlete's perspective and ask some questions that relate to college athletics. So the first one that we have on the docket here for you, Chris, is tell us a little bit about the recruiting process, what it was like for you to get recruited to play college football. You were recruited by Brian Kelly when he was at Central Michigan. So talk to us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so I was being recruited, kind of start the recruiting process. I was, I believe it was in 06 when I was a junior. I think the first recruiting letter I got was from University of Colorado, just kind of showing interest, kind of one of those, and I don't remember exactly what it said, but one of those letters. That just kind of says, we're interested in you, we're watching you, good luck during the season, that type of thing. And then from that point on, I kept getting more and more letters coming in from other colleges kind of throughout the weeks. My high school coach would just kind of give out the letters to the players. And, again, it was, some of those letters were just, hey, we're watching you throughout the season. Best of luck to you. We'll stay in contact. Other letters kind of throughout would, maybe invite you to, a game or a visit, something with the team, something with coaches kind of through that. And then I got invited, an official invite to two camps. One was an Adidas camp, which I believe was at Notre Dame. And then there was a Nike camp at Ohio State. And you go there, you do the regular kind of like combine stuff. You run a 40, you do bench presses and all that type of stuff. You go out, you run pass routes with the other quarterbacks, receivers, with tight ends, that type of thing. And I was being recruited as a tight end. There was a coach there from Central. His name was Greg Forrest. He was the tight ends coach at the time, I believe. And that was at, I want to say, the Notre Dame one, and I can't remember for sure. But I remember I had got a call soon after that from Central Michigan, and I didn't know much about Central Michigan. I grew up in DeWitt, Michigan, which was probably 50 minutes south of Central Michigan, and ended up getting a call from Central Michigan soon after by their lineman coach, who was my recruiting coach at that area. And he had offered a full ride scholarship. I was being recruited as well by other local schools like Michigan State, Eastern Michigan, Western Michigan. I went on a couple visits to Michigan State, Notre Dame. I went on one, Michigan, and kind of like up through like 2007, 2006, 2007, kind of up through my senior year. I kind of got sick of kind of the recruiting process. And again, I'm speaking on behalf of my term, so whatever I say, I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody else, but this is kind of what I went through. I kind of got sick of the recruiting process. Kind of got sick of getting all like the letters, being invited, that type of thing. So I felt like when I got the offer from Central, I jumped on it. And yes, I was being recruited by Brian Kelly, who is now at Notre Dame. A quick story, I went on my official visit to Central with probably 20 some other recruits. Sunday morning, we got invited over to Brian Kelly's house to have brunch and meet with the families and, all the other recruits. And he met with each player and their parents in his home office, gave the spiel of, hey, we're really looking forward to having you come play for us. And then we left Central, we got back to DeWitt, and we got a call from a family friend who said, "Hey, what do you think about Brian Kelly leaving Central?" And we kind of go, "What are you talking about? Like, we just met with him at his house." And they go, "No, like, he just came out and said that he's going to Cincinnati." So, yes, I was being recruited under Brian Kelly. Never played under him. Got to meet him a couple times, obviously through the recruiting process. But after Brian Kelly left, that's when Butch Jones came in, and I played under Butch Jones. And again, I was, the full ride offer was still on the table. Um, so that was kind of the start of and kind of through the recruiting process up till Central.
Awesome, Chris. So during your time at CMU, you spent time with multiple head coaching changes. You were recruited by Brian Kelly, which you mentioned how he left surprisingly right after meeting with him, um, and offered a scholarship by him. You never did get an opportunity to play for him, but you've worked with Butch Jones, Dan Enos as head coaches. Was it difficult to have multiple coaching changes during your time at CMU and the different, even leadership qualities and philosophies that they bring in and those changes that took place?
Um, I feel like for me, there's kind of, and obviously, you go throughout high school, you're playing with the same coach, you're under the same coach, you're playing with the same guys, and you're growing up with those guys. So, um, eh, I guess being recruited by Brian Kelly, it's one of those things like it's it's kind of like uncharted waters. Like you're not really familiar with like the whole college aspect of sports and kind of like how the whole coaching stuff works. And that's kind of something I was surprised by and wasn't familiar with. I kind of thought that I would be playing under Brian Kelly my whole time there, and I know that coaches leave all the time from schools. But I think kind of waiting to see like number one who was the coach coming in after Brian Kelly, and then hearing like, hey, it's Butch Jones. I don't know the guy. I think he came from West Virginia, maybe. I can't remember. Um, but obviously it's a new thing for all the players. You bring in new coaches, and it's you wonder if number one, you wonder if they're going to keep your scholarship. Number two, if they're going to continue to have you um, or recruit you as the same position. Like me, I was a tight end, and then continue to um, kind of go throughout like the practices and all that type of stuff with them with the coaches. Um, and with talking about Butch Jones and Dan Enos, I felt like they cared a lot about their players. I felt like they were very dedicated. Um, they were the first people, obviously, in the building in the morning and last to leave. If you ever had a question or um, if something was bothering you, whatever it may have been, it was something where you could go and talk to the coaches, and they had like open door policy. Um, but like I said, they're very dedicated, very caring coaches. So I feel like that's something that was a good leadership quality of them. Um, Something that really stands out to me with Butch Jones is when I first started at Central, I really struggled with kind of being homesick, and even though it was only 50 minutes away from where I grew up, I still struggled with it. Um, you're going to a new place, you're going off to college, you don't know anybody, and then you get thrown into this team of all these guys that don't really know each other than the guys who have been there, sophomores, and up. But you have the freshmen coming in, and a lot lot of these guys were very good or top players in high school. So you're being kind of thrown into a group of guys where everybody is through high school. You were kind of like the very good player, and then you get thrown into college, and you're kind of like at the bottom of the totem pole again. But something I kind of struggled with was the homesickness, kind of maybe getting along with maybe some of the guys. And I had a rough time going through training camp, just kind of getting through it, just kind of like, coaches yelling. And then after practice, then um, you have to go off to eat with the team, and then you have to come back, and then you have to watch film with the team, and you're doing this for weeks on, a couple weeks on end before the season starts, and you're spending every waking moment with the same guys, and there's really no for me there was really no place to like breathe and just kind of get out of my own head. But I remember, like, every night it would be around like 9:30, 10 o'clock. I'd get done and be like, man, I just don't know if I can do this. And I really struggle with that. And I remember there was one time where I was um, watching film with the tight ends, and Butch Jones came down, and he just tapped me on the shoulder, and he was like, "Hey, come with me." So, and this was, I think, was at like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night on a weekday. And he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Hey, come with me." He's like, let's just go take a walk. So we walked up to his office. He was like, "We'll just go ahead and talk for a little bit." He's like, "I understand that you're going through some tough times, and I just kind of want to talk with you." So we walked up to his office, and who was sitting there were my parents. Butch Jones had actually taken time out of his night and training camp to call my parents from DeWitt to drive up and have a meeting, just the four of us in his office. And I remember he looked at me and he said, "Chris, you're not going to quit," and he's like, "I understand it's tough. I understand it's something that you're not used to, but," he's like, "you are not going to quit. I'm not going to let you quit. No matter how hard it gets, I'm not going to let you quit." And that's something that will always stick with me, because I mean, today I don't know where I'd be if I would have went home. I don't know if I would have gone to like a community school or community college, and that allowed me to stick at Central, to obviously have a full ride scholarship all the way through school and get my degree, which has kind of led me to where I'm at today. But yeah, that's something that will always stick with me about Butch Jones, is just how much he cared for his players and for me.
Yeah, Chris, I love that story. And I think you alluded to a lot of, a lot leading into our next question. You alluded to, I think, what you may say here a little bit, but what were some of the better leadership qualities that some of these coaches possessed? And it sounds like with Butch Jones, it was a little bit of compassion,
Yeah.
and caring there. So, maybe just expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, it's rough, man. It's college sports are a whole different breed from high school, and if there's any high schooler that watches this, that's playing football and wants to go play in college, it's now looking back on it, I feel like it's a huge mindset. Um, Not necessarily physical. Yes, you have to be. It's a physical sport, and you have to be in shape and all that type of stuff. But um, a lot of it, to me, looking back now, is mental. Just saying, like, hey, like, I could have gotten through it. Maybe a little different, if I would have just thought about stuff a little bit. But yeah, just going back to Butch Jones, and just kind of his compassion towards myself and other players, no matter how tough practice may get. Like, you have to understand, like, these coaches are people at the end of the day. Um, they have families, that they have to provide for. And at the end of the day, they have an open door policy, and you can go to them and talk about anything you want. Um, you know, get stuff off your chest. And speaking about getting stuff off your chest, I remember doing this with Butch Jones. He had what's called a bleed session, and this was where players, um, after practices or kind of throughout the season, like, players would just get together in the locker room and just kind of talk about, like, their how they grew up, or maybe what they're going through, or tough times or good times, whatever it may be, so that the players kind of got more comfortable with each other. And I can't remember if the coaches were actually a part of this, or if it was just kind of like between players. But that's something that, I also thought was pretty cool that the coaches did. Um, and that, moving in from there, um, from what I remember, Butch, he he made it a big point to talk about how the team was a player run team rather than a coach run team. Um, Kind of meaning where, the guys had accountability on one another, rather than the coach continuously having to, um, jump down your throat. If you miss a play, or if you lose a game, or whatever it may be, rather than him and the other coaches continuously having to jump down your throat, the players held the other players accountable. And that's what I feel kind of closely knit all of us, and allowed us to win a couple MAC championships while I was there. Quick little story. I remember in 2007, I think it was the fourth game of the season. We played North Dakota State, a 1AA school, and we lost that game. And I remember there was a offensive lineman. I think his name was Adam Antonides. He got up in front of the entire team and got super, super pissed off, and just kind of let everybody know kind of his thoughts about losing to North Dakota State. I remember there was this podium that Butch Jones always kind of used and talked behind, but I remember it was like a wooden podium, and I remember Adam literally throwing it or pushing it to the ground, how mad he was that we had lost that game. And from there on out, I don't think we had lost another conference game that season. We went on to win a MAC championship. But again, going back, that's a player run team rather than a coach run team. And that's something that Butch Jones, from what I remember, he kind of put into the works while I was there.
That's awesome, Chris. It sounds like Butch Jones clearly made a huge impact in your life and your development as an adult. And that's what all these leaders have the ability to do. So that's fantastic. You started to allude onto the topic of playing college athletics being a mental approach. And that's going to kind of tailor right into our next question here. But you suffered an injury that ultimately was career-ending for you, and you never made it back onto the football field, unfortunately. Talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges it was to recover from an injury, maybe for you personally, and other experiences that you think college athletes face in regards to maybe some mental health challenges that they go through. We've seen mental health come right to the front and center of things this past year or two. In sports, and there's a lot of people that deal with mental health challenges out there. So, what are some of the struggles you had, and maybe kind of elaborate a little bit on struggles that that college athletes in general might have.
So when I was in 2008, I believe it was against Buffalo. I was kind of going back a little bit. So I told you I was being recruited as a tight end. I came as a tight end. I was going to be redshirted as a tight end. We had some other players that obviously were ready to play when they came in as freshmen. One of them being J.J. Watt, who was one of our starting tight ends. So I was going to be redshirted. We had a long snapper who came in from, I want to say, California, who got real homesick. He was only there for maybe a week or two, and he took a red-eye flight home, from what I remember. And so the next practice, they had open tryouts for long snapper. Now, I long snapped a little bit in high school, but then they had open tryouts for long snapper. So I told the coaches that, hey, I could try long snapping. So I did. And from that point on, I actually went from being redshirted to being the starting long snapper at Central, which is what I played while I was at school. In 2008 against Buffalo, I remember snapping the ball and running down the field and kind of tripping up the returner in an awkward way. But when I was pushing up, another CMU player got pushed down on the back of my left elbow. And it hyperextended my elbow to the point where I couldn't play for a few weeks, I think it was. I was in a cast from my wrist all the way up kind of to my shoulder area, kind of in an L shape, keeping it stabilized for a few weeks. Got out of that, went through like some physical therapy. And from that point on, and getting my muscle back, but from that point on, I kind of kept realizing like, hey, like there's issues with my shoulder. My shoulder doesn't feel right. My trap just doesn't feel right. So I kept telling the trainer, like, hey, like, I just don't feel right. I got an MRI, found out that I had a torn labrum in my left shoulder, and which I ended up getting surgery on. And kind of from that point on, it was hard to long snap coming back because I had this huge kind of Don Joy elbow brace on. It was obviously with the elbow brace on, it's hard to snap a ball through your legs. And by that point, when I came back, I think it was in 2009, late 2009, 2010, something like that. We had another long snapper that came in. So I had actually asked to go back to play tight end by that point, which I was practicing for kind of throughout spring practice and such. But I was still having issues with my trap area and just kind of this dull pain that I was going through. Like no matter what I was doing, practices, that type of stuff, just getting through practice. And at the end, I was just in just kind of pain and just kind of kept telling myself like, hey, like it's not really worth it to me anymore. And I think, it's something I kind of struggled with in regards to kind of calling it quits. I remember exactly where I was at when I called it quits playing football. There's this tunnel that would run from the indoor facility down to the locker room out to the field, which I don't think they have anymore. But I remember meeting up with Dan Enos at the time, and I said, Dan, like, hey, he knew I was going through this stuff because obviously the coaches and the trainers, they talk about all the players, they talk about what they're going through and their injuries, when they're going to be back. But we had talked, and I just said, Coach, I don't think I can do anymore. Like, it's something I've been struggling with, and I want to be able to pick up my kids someday. I don't want to go through my entire rest of my life in pain or have to get another surgery or whatever it may be. So I call it quits. Right there in that tunnel. And, I cried a little bit. But there was also kind of relief in a way. something I feel like I kind of struggled with mentally was it's it was tough because being on full ride scholarship, um, it's kind of like one of those things. Like you wonder like if they're going to take your scholarship away, which obviously it was a football related injury, so I don't really know if they could do that, but that's something that kind of went through my head. You wonder how the players, may look at you. You wonder how the coaches may look at you. Um, if they think you're just quitting. Um, but again, they don't know what you're going through. They don't know kind of your physical being and what you're going through. Um, and that's something I kind of struggled with. And I know I played with a bunch of other players who also went through injuries as well, and I don't want to speak on behalf of them, but um, that's just something that I struggled with, just mentally, kind of wondering, before I call it quits, should I call it quits? How are people going to perceive me? What role is this now going to put me in? Which after I stopped playing football, I was still with the team. I still helped out with being a student coach. I still helped out with student coaching the offensive line, helping the offensive line coach out. But yeah, it's a huge pressure to put on a 18 to 22-year-old kid, um, to have to perform every week, in front of, well, when you're playing college football, in front of 60 to 80,000, you know, um, fans, sometimes less depending on wherever you're playing. But yeah, it's a huge pressure. And not only that, but like, um, the you're also, like I said, you're also wondering what the coaches are thinking. This is how the coaches, live. So you want to try and do your best, not only for the team but also for the coaches. But again, like I said, it's a mental thing for your own self, and you got to tell yourself like, hey, you got to do what's best for you at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's that's awesome, Chris. Thank you for sharing that with us. We know it's not always easy to talk about the mental health challenges that people are experiencing, but it's so critically important that we always talk about it and that we address it when we're having struggles and challenges. It's really critical to always talk with people about that. So we thank you for sharing that angle with us, from an athlete's perspective. We heard you talk about all the great things about Coach Butch Jones, and it sounds like he made a fantastic impact in your life, and a lot of the things that he was able to do as a coach. It sounds like he was a leader that really cared about his people and about everybody that was around him. We've had a lot of past guests talk about servant leadership, and Butch Jones sounds like he's 100% a coach who believed in that servant leadership mentality. So thank you again, Chris, for sharing all this wonderful stuff with us from the athlete's perspective. We enjoyed it. We know you got a busy schedule, so thanks for carving out a little bit of time in your day to talk with us.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Zach. Good to meet you.